Is it correct that you used to read a book a day?
Yes. Unless it was a really big book, and it might have taken me 2 days.
War and Peace or something? Or
I never read War and Peace, but yeah, something like that would take me a really long time.
can we talk about why would you read a book a day and where would you find the time?
So I was in prison, and so when I had that type of appetite for reading and I had the time in solitary confinement, I read all day. That's what I did, yeah.
And I understand that you loved Anne Rice, like vampire stories or...
I loved all of Anne Rice's books about vampires, Lestat and Interview with the Vampire. And I mean, I think I read, I don't remember how many books there was at that time, but at least, I don't know, 7 or 8 books in that series that I really got into it.
But you weren't into, let's say, crime novels. You wanted an interesting, different world.
Well, I read crime novels. I read some crime novels. Like, my family would send me books, that my dad had a buddy who would give him a bunch of books and then he would ship them to me, or my mother would ship them to me. So I would have a bunch of books to read, and it would just be a variety of different things. And then whatever guys are reading. I mean, I read everything. I really did. I read a lot of fictional stuff. I read a lot of nonfiction. I read, I don't know, self-help books. There's like in prison, bringing prison up. There's like required reading in prison. It's not literally, but there's books that everybody reads in most prisons, like the 48 Laws of Power, and all the books by Robert Greene, and let's see, the Code of Bushido, and The Art of War, and the Book of Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi. Like, Eastern culture is big, so there's like a lot of those type of books that I got into. But I also, my favorite book of all time is A Count of Monte Cristo, and I think maybe because it was like a revenge story, and I was really into that at that time in my life.
Right. And what's the moral of that story?
Of The Count of Monte Cristo?
Yeah.
The moral of the story? I don't... Revenge is a dish best served cold. I don't know. Listen, I took from that book a lot of things back then. I was an angry guy back then. I felt pretty wronged back then. And so here's a story about a guy who gets, done pretty wrong, and he exacts revenge over years and years and years. It takes him to do it, but he does it. And I think at that time that was really appealing to me. It's not anymore, but the book is still an incredible book.
Excellent. Yeah, 48 Laws of Power is good too. I like watching Robert Greene's videos. I don't know if everybody totally thinks that way, but I think it's a good lesson in knowing that people do think that way, and you could be offending them without knowing it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think I still remember. I can't remember if it was the first law. I think it was never outshine the master. There's a lot of, but every single inmate, like, across the country that reads has probably picked up that book because they just circulate.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of lessons to be learned from that. Do you agree that reading can be transformative?
Well, yeah, in more ways than one. For example, it can be transformative in in the things that you learn from books and the knowledge that you'll have afterwards. It can be transformative mentally because you're taking yourself to a different place. I mean, it was transformative to me. Books were transformative to me in prison because I could read a book for 7, 8 hours straight, and I was in another world. I wasn't in a small little 8 by 7 foot cell. I was, in New Orleans in the 1800s, with these like incredible creatures, these vampires that are, a different life form that have been around for millennia. And I was able to take myself and put myself in a different place. Or, I got into Robert Ludlum for a while, I remember, and I was reading, all the Bourne books. And the original Bourne books are Vietnam era. So, or I mean, they were about the Vietnam era. Jason Bourne came from Vietnam. And so, I was this special forces operative that gets out and he's doing all these cool missions and loses his memory. And so, you're able to transform into a different reality. So, yeah, I think they're transformative, big time.
And then while we were setting up, speaking of reading, you said you are able to read a room. Where did that come from?
Well, it came from, I learned, I don't know who I picked up the saying from, probably my writing partner. But yeah, I know how to read a room. I mean, some people don't. Some people don't know how to read a room. Some people don't pick up on cues. I'm fortunate that, I think I can read a room fairly well.
Does that ever become a hindrance because, they say with empaths, because you can't turn it off, you can pick up on things that you don't necessarily want to pick up on? How does that affect you?
Sure. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how, I can't really articulate how it affects me. I'm grateful that I have the ability to, know when I might be a little too much or understand how to approach a situation for the most part. I think that's a benefit maybe,
Has it ever saved your life?
Well, not reading a room per se, but I certainly have had instincts in my life in situations, long before I became a writer, got into, Hollywood, that, that I listened to my instincts, sure.
How are you stuck in a mindset of misery while you were reading so many books? How does someone stay stuck like that, but you're reading these enlightening books or these transformative books?
Well, I think that human beings have an incredible ability to adapt to anything. So I remember, I spent almost 9 years in prison. And of those 9 years, about 5 of which they were in solitary confinement, for bad behavior. And those cells, some of those cells, this is in Illinois, are so small that when you get in, you can hold your elbow up and you can touch the wall with your other outstretched hand. And then there's a bed in there. And it's incredibly small and it's incredibly claustrophobic. And I remember the first time I got into that cell, I had a panic attack. And then they moved me into the exact same size cell, but with 2 people and a solid steel door with only little perforated holes that you couldn't see out of, but that you could get oxygen from. And this is in Menard Correctional Center in down south, Southern Illinois. My point is that I went from something that was horrible and I was panicking, and then I went into even worse situation, and I eventually just adapted to it. And taking turns, the guy that's on the top bunk taking turns, who's up, who's in bed, who's going to the bathroom, who's not. I mean, these are just things that I was able to adapt to, and I think that, that's just a broader way of answering your question. I think we just adapt to anything.
Did you learn to, I guess, is it called disassociate? You go somewhere else in your mind?
Only when I read, or the times where I was fortunate enough to have a television, watching a movie, or writing a letter. But no, I knew exactly where I was the whole time. Sometimes I could escape with literature, but yeah.
What is solitary confinement?
So the other word for solitary confinement is disciplinary segregation. So solitary confinement is where they typically will put you in a cell by yourself. They'll take away all of your commissary items like food items. They'll take away your television. So all that you'll have is your cosmetic items and books and paperwork, stuff that you can use to write. But and some I mentioned being in the cell with another guy. oftentimes prisons are so overpopulated that even in solitary confinement, they'll put you in a cell with another guy because there's just no capacity in the prison for all single man cells. But it's if you get in trouble in prison, you go to solitary confinement, you go to disciplinary segregation.
Now, this is something I think I heard you say on another show. I think it was Fresh Out. He has a
Okay.
YouTube channel.
Sure.
And you talked about they ask you what your religion is. What if you don't have a religion? What if you're not religious? Where do they place you, or does it matter?
No, doesn't matter. You just don't, and I can only speak on prison in Illinois. I would consider myself something of an expert, spending almost a decade there. But if you have a religion in Illinois, it goes on the back of your ID card. At least it did when I was there. And I got out in 2010, so it's been a while. But if you don't have a religion, it just doesn't go on your ID card. And different religions are entitled to different things in prisons. So, Christians or Catholics, they go to different services. Jews, Muslims, they go to different services, and et cetera.
And so if you don't have any type of dominant faith, or maybe even if you're born into something but you don't believe it, then you just wouldn't partake?
Yeah, I mean, it's people voluntarily say what their religion is, so there's dietary restrictions for different religions, and some people are very strict about it, and they want to be on a certain diet, and so they'll make sure that they let the officers know that, hey, this is my religion, and this, so they can get that.
Fascinating. And you said it was different in California from what you've heard?
Well, I have no idea. Look,
Okay.
I from what I've heard, sure. I mean, from the guys that I know that I've met that have been incarcerated in California, it's very different. Race, from what I understand, race kind of dominates the prison system in California. Gangs dominate the prison system in Illinois, so it's very different. I mean, even though there's plenty of gangs in California prisons, race segregates everybody. Whereas in Illinois, in the prison system there, what gang you belong to determines on kind of where you fit in.
What is life like once you get out of jail and you want to find work? What's that like?
For me, it was really tough. Well, I'll give you a little anecdote, I guess. I remember when I first got out, and I had really high hopes of, I was in great shape, and I wanted to be a personal trainer. And I remember before I got out, I was reading all of these muscle and fitness books, everything I can get my hands on. I knew all types of exercises. I, loved exercising. I loved working out. And, guys were telling me, oh, you should be a personal trainer. I said, okay. And I got out and I went to a gym, and I told this guy, it was Export Fitness in Arlington Heights outside of Chicago. And I said, I'd love to be a trainer. He says, really? He goes, oh my gosh, you'd be perfect. I go, okay, great. And he goes, yeah, just fill out an application, man, and we'll get you started. We'll pay for your certification, whatever the certification was. And I'm like, great. And I remember when I was in prison, they had told me in a class called Education for Careers to always be honest on the application, and just say, we'll explain, in the have you been convicted as a felon box? Just say, yes, we'll explain in an interview. So I did that. And I remember looking at this guy's face, and he's looking at the paper, and his eyes are scanning it, and he's smiling, and he's nodding. And then I see him see it, and he looked up at me, and he said, you're a felon. I go, yeah. He said, oh, okay. He said, what were you arrested for? I said, armed robbery. And he said, he goes, and he pointed to the cash register at the gym, and he's like, we work around cash here, and it's a corporation. And I said, buddy, no disrespect whatsoever, but it was an armed robbery for drug dealers with, that were supposed to have 2 kilos of ecstasy. I'm not going to rob you for, your petty cash in the register, you know. And he's like, you know, oh, I'm sorry, buddy. I don't think I can, you know, help you and whatever. The point is after that happened to me, I used it as an excuse to just say, screw this. You know, I might have tried a couple more times for a couple different jobs, but it really affected me in a negative way to where I'm just like, wow, I can't even get a job doing this. So screw it. Now I think there are more opportunities. Now I don't think that you have to put you're a convicted felon on an application, from what I understand. I mean, there are steps in the right direction that are being taken. But for me, yeah, it affected me in a pretty negative way, I suppose, back then.
Just out of curiosity, when you got out of prison, was it the first time and you went to look for a job, or maybe the second?
That was the first time, yeah.
Okay, the first time. So, you know, you're in your 20s at that point?
Yeah, 23.
Okay, so should be easy to find a job. And did you ever like not put on there that you had been, you know, convicted of a misdemeanor or felony?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, I did. And it was for a warehouse job in Elk Grove Village. And I remember, it's crazy because I remember it was a job, they were those infomercials that sell products like books and things, and the warehouse packed those boxes up and shipped them out. So there were people putting these books and like I think supplements and stuff into boxes, and then it was just a whole, you know, somebody puts the stickers on them and so, you know, and ships them out. And I remember going to apply for this job, and there was maybe 4 or 5 people applying. There was a woman who I saw checked that she was a felon, and I lied on the application, and I got the job. And I remember they told her in front of me, they were just like, oh yeah, sorry, no, we can't hire any felons here. And I was thinking, oh man, are they gonna do a background check? But they didn't. I got the job. I mean, it didn't last, but I got the job.
How did stunt work save your life?
Well, prior to stunts, I was a professional boxer. That's what I did for a living, and I supplemented my income by bouncing at bars and clubs and whatnot in Chicago. And so I say it saved my life because I had best case scenario at the time for me, at least from what I thought, maybe I could work myself up to a big payday in boxing. You know, I was going to just try to fight, you know, to somewhat of the top to get a name fighter that I could possibly get a big purse. That never happened. I wasn't a good enough boxer at all. But that was what my dream was, you know. Maybe I could just sell enough tickets and get a fan base and fight to the top, and then retire with some money and open up a business. I wanted to do a franchise, maybe a restaurant, something like that. But that was like the best case scenario for me. I don't have any skills. I got a GED in county jail that I cheated on. I went to a couple classes in prison, which have served me actually, like computer technology, where I learned to type and whatnot. But I didn't have a academic background, so I didn't know what I could do. Not to mention the fact that boxing kept me very strict with how I ate and how, you know, and not smoking and how I ate, and, you know, so many benefits that happened because of boxing. But I was a fighter, and my promoter told me, you know, he was consulting on a television show in Chicago. This was in 2013. And the show was called Mind Games, with Christian Slater and Steve Zahn. It was 1 season. And so they were doing an episode, I think it was episode 8, I can't remember, but where the guest star, the storyline of the episode was, you know, an aging boxer does something. And my promoter, Bobby Hitz, he calls me up. He's a big, tough guy. Hey, Sammy, he goes, hey, listen, you want to go down to PR casting on Huron and do an audition for me. You might be able to get a part. I genuinely did not know what that even meant. I didn't know what an audition was. I had no idea what he was talking about. I go, what are you talking about? He says, I'm doing a TV show. I'm helping out on a TV show. I go, are they going to pay me? He says, yeah, they'll pay you, kid. You just go down there. They'll pay you. If you get the role, they'll pay you. I said, all right. So I went down there to the casting agency, and, I saw the casting director. She was seeing a couple fighters, and she said, can you look tough? And I, I stared her down. She's like, okay. She said, can you talk some trash? So I talked a little trash. She said, can you shadow box? I did a little shadow box. And she's like, all right, thanks. And I'm like, all right. And I left. And then later that day, she called me up and she goes, hey, we're putting you on a hold. I said, okay. And then they called me up a couple hours later and said, hey, sorry, but we think that you look a little too similar to the guest star, so we're not going to use you. I said, okay. No harm, no foul. I genuinely didn't care. Didn't know anything. So I left. And then I got another phone call. And they said, hey, Sammy, you still available on these dates? I go, yeah. They go, can you come down here and meet the fight coordinator of the episode? I didn't know what that even meant, but I said, sure, because I knew there was money involved. So I went, and they made me his double. Now, I didn't get a SAG card. They didn't make me a stunt double. Knowing what I know now, I absolutely was a stunt double. I don't think that they thought I was seriously trying to do stunts. I think that they were just looking to fill a spot and have somebody just in case. But they paid me, production paid me as a photo double, and which was fine by me. I was making $250 a day. I was at craft services every day, standing next to Christian Slater and trying to talk to Steve Zahn. I mean, to me, I was loving it. I thought it was the greatest thing that ever happened in my life. But I wasn't able to break in that day or that week because it was a 9-day, shoot. But I remember that the hair and makeup people, they're the ones that were like, you should do stunts. You should be a stuntman. I go, really? They go, yeah, you can make a living doing this. And I was, for the whole episode, I was doing the boxing. I was doing falls. I was falling. They were like, hey, can you pretend to fall? And I was doing all this stuff. I didn't know what I was doing back then, but I was doing it, not realizing that that was stunts. And I should have gotten a Taft-Hartley and gotten the SAG card off of that. But again, that was the impetus for me wanting to become a stuntman. And I just went after it like really, really seriously after that.
Did they shoot a lot of shows in Chicago?
Yeah, there's at least, I mean, look, there's always been a lot of stuff in Chicago, I think, for at least 30 years. But you have the Chicago shows, you have the Dick Wolf, Chicago Fire, Chicago Med, Chicago PD. They had Chicago Justice for a while. They had Crisis. They had, Prison Break. Right now they had Empire. They shot Empire out there for a long time, 6 seasons, I think. The Bear. I mean, and then also a lot of movies get exteriors. A lot of movies that take place in Chicago, they film. They might film in Atlanta, but they'll still do a couple weeks in Chicago. So there's always stuff going in and out.
I think you had a mentor that said to you, you can make a lot of money playing the bad guy.
Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, I don't know where you dug that up. If I'm not mistaken, that was a guy named Brian Christensen, who was very early on in my career. He really helped me. And they were doing a Midwest Stunts golf outing. And so I don't play golf, but I went to the outing because I wanted to try to hustle with these stunt guys. And they teamed me up with Brian, and he's an old school stunt guy. And we were talking, and he liked me, he took a liking to me, and he goes, Sammy, he goes, you can make a living playing the bad guy. You can make a whole living. He was looking at my face. He goes, you can make a whole living playing the bad guy. I go, really? He said, yeah. And that was, that's what I did for a decade after that, almost.
Why is it that you would rarely turn down a job?
Well, now I do, but for a long time, I looked at it as, one, an opportunity for me to show my skills. Two, an opportunity for me to learn. Three, an opportunity for me to meet new people. An opportunity for me to impress the boss, the stunt coordinator, and do a good job and get another job. An opportunity for that to show that person that I'm serious, for them to recommend me to somebody else. I mean, there's dividends that could be paid off of doing any job, no matter how small. In the business, I mean, look, when you get to a certain place, it doesn't make sense anymore. That's totally understandable. But when you're first starting off, like I was flying. I was in Chicago, flying to California, pretending that I lived here, hustling stunt coordinators, pretending that I lived here. And when I got a call for a job, I would fly out here, and I wouldn't make any money on that job, but I was making connections and I was working. I was working on shows, and I wasn't even living in Cali at the time. But that's how I did it. It was frowned upon in SAG to do that. But guess what? SAG wasn't paying my bills. I had to make a living. And, and a lot of people still do. So I understand it, but that's just what it was.
Why do stunt workers have to be SAG in order to work in the business?
Well, I think there's, it's the same with actors. It's the exact same thing. I think that there's a level of professionalism that comes with joining SAG. It shows that you are a professional. It shows that you're at a certain level. Look, there's a lot of talented actors out there, and there's a lot of talented stunt people out there. But SAG, you have to be in SAG to, I shouldn't say you have to be in SAG. Once you work on a TV show or a film, like a big budget film or a TV show, you'll eventually have to join SAG anyway. So they have unions for actors. It's a union for performers, right? So if you're not in that union, it kind of shows that you're not at that level. You're not at a professional level. So I always advise people, stunt people that are up and coming that I've talked to, or actors that are up and coming that I've spoken to, that might be eligible to join SAG, but they're like, oh, well, I haven't decided to do it yet. I don't know. I think I'm going to wait. Why are you going to wait? Why are you going to wait? Why are you going to have SAG eat? No, be SAG. You're SAG. You're a professional, right? You're a professional actor. You're a professional stunt performer. Then join SAG. Because not that I'm not the SAG mascot. I'm just simply saying that it does show that, okay, you're a professional, because anybody that has worked for any period of time on a show has a SAG card. That's just what it is. So that's the only reason. I'm not going around cheering for SAG. I'm just simply saying that it is the union for performers. So that's, if you consider yourself a professional performer, especially if you have the opportunity to join, then you should join only for that reason.
Yeah, the only time I've heard people that maybe don't want to join, even if they're eligible, is if they do extra work, because a lot of times there would be more non-union. But otherwise, yeah, I wouldn't see why you wouldn't want to be paid at scale. And
absolutely.
Right. Makes sense. Lastly, what are some of the craziest stunts you've done?
Well, look, there are so many more talented stunt performers than me. I have been fortunate where I've done I'm pretty well-rounded, but there are like incredible drivers, incredible horsemen, horsewomen, incredible, contortionists and parkour athletes, and people that just do insane things that I could never do. For me, because I come from a boxing background, I've done a lot of fights, and I'm good at fights, and that's what I kind of made my career as, either a bad guy with how I look, saying a few lines of dialogue and getting killed, or doing really cool fights. So I've done a lot of pretty awesome fights. One thing that was crazy, I got set on fire. It didn't make it off the cutting room floor. but I did a show a while back in New Orleans, and they had to set me on fire. Well, they set my arm on fire, but it spread, and it was really cool. And so that was awesome. I crashed a Corvette early in my career into a, off the highway into a sign on a movie called Take the 10, where I was stunt doubling Josh Peck, I think, in that. But, I've just done a lot of really cool fights. I've been thrown through things. I've smashed through things a bunch. I've done a bunch of falls and fights and cool things, but I haven't done any like incredible, falling off of 3 stories or 4 stories or whatnot, but I've done some cool stuff.
How many stunt people do you know right now that are writers, that have become screenwriters?
One, but his circumstances are very special. I know a former Navy SEAL who went on to become a writer, and he's very successful. And that's it, and me.
Interesting. So he did his service and retired, and then...
Well, I met him on a job, on a stunt job, and it was, we became friends. And then a few years later, I saw a Deadline article with him, and I saw that he was, writing on a television show, and I'm like, wow, that's awesome. And he was a stuntman, he did stunts. So, but that's it. I don't know any other actual stunt performer, man or woman, that has gone on to write on television outside of myself. Yeah.
When you moved to LA, did you know you were going to begin writing?
Yes. Yeah, I moved here to eventually become a writer. I mean, I was doing stunts full time. That was my career. But I came out here to meet my writing partner before we decided to move out here. I mean, my wife introduced me to my now writing partner and best friend, Adam Payson. And, so I came out, I met with him, and we kind of vibed at that time. And so when we made the decision to come out here full time, it was absolutely to work as a stuntman for me, and my wife's an actor, so it was for her to work as an actor. But I had aspirations of eventually pivoting into writing, hopefully.
When you say vibed, how do you know that that's like you want to spend time working on a creative project with someone?
So we didn't become best friends overnight. My writing partner, Adam, and I are polar opposites. I mean, in every possible way. He is incredibly educated. He's got a doctorate, and master's from Northwestern and doctorate from Western Michigan, and he's, won playwriting awards and the Kennedy Award. I mean, he's just incredibly accomplished and brilliant. And I am not brilliant, and I'm not super academic, and I'm certainly not academically accomplished. Adam's, I'm an ex-criminal, ex-drug addict, ex-criminal, ex-athlete. He's not. We're just very different in many ways, but we got along, and we filled in the gaps for each other. And also, he taught me how to write. I knew how to tell stories. I knew how to do that, but I didn't know how to put them on paper. I didn't know how to structure them. And Adam, I feel like I have a master's now because I feel like I learned from him everything I needed to know about story structure and, 5-act structure and 3-act structure and half hours and 1 hour. I mean, he taught me all this stuff. And so over the course of, some years, we went from him, kind of me saying, hey, this would be cool, this would be cool. The first 6 months we worked together, it was to write a movie, a biopic. And so I would be telling him stories. But very soon after that, it was him showing me, okay, this is how you do this, and giving me books to read and me learning how to do this stuff until we've gotten to the place we are now, and that we've been for, 6 years, which is, we we're just 50-50 partners that both come up with ideas. We both break it down. We outline things, and we, write things.
You said that you didn't think you were brilliant. Isn't there a different kind of brilliance that's not just book smarts, though? I mean, you've been around different people. You've said you know how to read a room. There's a brilliance in that.
Well, I I certainly think I have some strengths. I have some strengths that I'm pretty proud of, and I guess gifts maybe, but nothing like spectacular. I think my best gift is that I'm a good writer. I'm good at stuff, but I was a pretty good stuntman, and I was a pretty decent actor, But I think I'm a pretty good writer, and that's my strength.
And so the fact that someone in Hollywood might say, well, you have to have this degree from this school, then it doesn't mean you're brilliant. How do you challenge that? How do you say, you know what, though, I can tap into human emotion?
Yeah, I don't think Hollywood is doing that now. I just don't. I don't see that. I think that Hollywood is more interested in authentic storytelling, and I haven't, thank God, I haven't had that type of pushback. I've had people that are really interested in the type of experiences that I can bring to the table, and the things and the stories that I'm telling. And also my partner, Adam, he's got incredible stories and experience, and yeah, he is very accomplished academically, but he's also an incredible storyteller in his own right, and he's just awesome. So I just haven't dealt with that, I don't think so.
Were you writing at all when you were living in Chicago?
Yes, but not screenplays. I was working on a autobiography with my therapist at that time.
And this was going to be a book or a play, or?
Yeah, so I mean, this is why I started writing. This is why I started writing film and television, because I was writing my therapist. I saw this therapist when I got out of prison, and I really, we were good friends, and I really respected this therapist. I mean, I still do, but I really liked the therapist, and he said, you should write a book. And so we were collaborating on this book, and my girlfriend, who's now my wife at the time, she's like, that's not professional. You shouldn't be writing a book with your therapist. And I didn't see any problem with it, but my, then girlfriend was like, that's crazy. And so she said, have you ever thought about writing a movie? And I said, no. And she says, well, look, I know this writer. I went to school with him. He's really talented. He's in LA right now. You should meet him. And I said, all right. And the rest is history.
That's Adam.
Yeah, that's Adam.
Right. With the book, what were your hopes for it?
I don't know. I didn't think that far in advance back then. I certainly think a little further down the line now than back then. I mean, I don't know. I thought I would write a cool book, a cool story. I wanted to tell my story. I was interested in that. I hadn't accomplished 50% of what I have now, which is wild, but at that time I thought it was pretty cool doing what I was doing, which was boxing, and now I just started, maybe I was like a year in or 2 years into doing stunts on television and whatnot, so it was cool to me, I wanted to write it and just get it out. I wanted to get it out. I felt like I needed to get it out, I think, back then.
Did it help when I don't know how far you got in the book?
Yeah, not far.
Not far, oh. A couple chapters, or?
Not even.
Oh, okay.
First page.
First page?
Yeah, maybe two.
Oh, no, okay.
I had started writing it in prison. I had started writing a book in prison about a story like from childhood that was gonna go into this book. So I had technically started trying to write in prison, but didn't kind of pick that back up until I was out.
Did you think that people wouldn't want to read it?
No, I didn't think so. I thought people would want to read. I don't know who would want to read it, but there's an audience for everything. There's an audience for, film courage. There's an audience for, probably learning how to fill up water balloons properly. I'm sure there's a YouTube video somewhere on it with 100,000 views. I mean, so I knew there was going to be somebody that wanted to watch it, I don't know. Right. Or read it, sorry.
Well, I mean, a lot of times we don't think our own story is interesting. Or there's then the flip side in Hollywood where people think that they're so interesting. There's a danger in that too. But
yeah, no, absolutely. I think at that time, this guy, my therapist at the time had told me, like, this is a pretty cool story and you can help some people with this and it would be cool to get this out. And I'm like, yeah, all right. Just because of, we haven't got into my past a lot and whatever, but, I was a heroin addict. I was a criminal. I spent a long time in prison. I spent a long time in juvenile detention, in placements growing up. And so to go from that to then getting sober and becoming a professional athlete and then breaking into Hollywood, even if it was Hollywood in Chicago, breaking into Hollywood and working on films and TV shows, it was cool, and so I thought, yeah, okay, I got a story to tell, yeah.
I know you've written some plays as well. I'm wondering, of all your stories, screenplays, theatrical plays, what's the closest to your heart? What means the most to you? Which one?
My plays.
Your plays?
Yeah.
You have at least 3 of them, right?
I have 2 full-length plays, I have 2 short plays, and I have 3 outlines for full-length plays. And only one of my plays has been produced. But there's a simple reason for that too. Adam and I are partners, 50-50 partners on every single television pilot or television show or movie, film that we write. We are partners on those things. And when you read those scripts, they're ours, they're both of our voices put together. But my plays are mine. His plays are his. He's got his own plays and that he gets out there. I have my plays. They're my voice and only my voice, and they're, I feel like they're a part of me. So that's why they're very important to me.
And you said only one had been performed?
One had been produced. Yeah. So okay. I wrote a play kind of by accident. So I woke up with a name on my mind when I first moved to LA, and the name was Musket Cherry. And I wrote it down, and we were living, my wife and I were living like right next to Larchmont in Koreatown. And I wrote it down. I'm like, wow, that's so crazy. I don't know why it popped into my brain. I have no idea why. I never did any theater. I never read any plays. But my wife has done over 100 plays. I mean, she's a classically trained actor that has just done a lot of theater in Chicago. And so I was rolling around with this story in this name in my mind, and then I kind of just like created this story. And so I read this play. I read a Stephen Adly Gierges play, the MF-er with the hat, right? And I was like, wow, you could write stuff like, I didn't know that you could write plays like that. I thought, I was so ignorant to it. I thought that plays were only like Shakespeare, I didn't know that you could write street stuff. And my wife said, you could write whatever you want. And so, and this was, by the way, before I had that dream. I had read that play, and then so I had that dream. I woke up with that name, and I came up with this story about this just tough chick on the northwest side of Chicago in Jefferson Park who sold heroin out of her mom's basement. And her mom's an alcoholic, her dad's out of the picture, and the only good thing in her life is her little brother. And she's trying to get him out. She's trying to get him out of the city to save his life. And she's got a kind of like an abusive jerk boyfriend, gang member. And, her world comes crashing down around her when her little brother gets arrested for a crime he didn't commit, and she's got to get the bail money. And so I wrote that in a play. I had no idea what I was doing. I just read that one play, so I kind of knew, okay, it goes by dialogue. You don't write actions, you just write dialogue. Everything is performed by the actors, and you just do the dialogue with very simple stage directions. And that's what I wrote. And so I did it, and my partner Adam read it. He's like, "Oh, this is pretty good." I'm like, "Oh, thanks." And my wife's like, "This is really good." And I said, "Thank you." And then I was teaching a boxing class at Hollywood Boulders. It was a climbing gym on Santa Monica and Bronson. I was teaching a boxing class, and I had a lot of actors and people come to the class. I would teach it once a week because they gave me a free membership to the gym. Like, that was why I taught this class. I used to pay for a membership there. Then they found out I was a pro boxer. They said, "Would you teach a class? We'll give you a free membership for you and your wife." I says, "Yeah, okay." So I'm doing that, and there's a guy in my class talking about theater. I told him I was a playwright, and he looked at me like I was lying to him. I don't know, my personality, I'm not sure, but I said, "No, really, I'm a playwright." He goes, "Can I read your play?" I go, "Yeah." And so I emailed it to him, and he called me and he said, "Hey, Sammy, can we meet at Groundworks? I want to talk to you about your play." I said, "Okay." And I met him, and he said, "Hey, man, so I have a production company with my family, and I want to produce your play." And he produced it. And so my play went up. It was a short run. It was a 2.5-week run, but it was, it was an equity play, and it was at a 99-seat theater in Hollywood, and it did really well. It got really good reviews, and it was, the actors were awesome, and yeah, it was incredibly special.
Musket and the Rat?
Musket and the Rat. And had it not been for Musket and the Rat, I don't think I'd just be back to doing stunts and only stunts, because the woman who is now my manager came to a performance, and she was an agent at CAA for 14 years. And she came to the play, and she came up to me afterwards. She had already left the agency, and she came up to me and she says, "The dialogue's really good." I go, "Oh, thanks a lot." And she said, "Have you ever heard of Gary Lennon?" I said, "I'm sorry, no, I haven't." She goes, "Oh, you guys have a lot in common. You should meet him." I didn't know who he was, and I looked him up when I got home, and I saw he's a showrunner and he's a playwright, and he's prolific. He's done and Gary is one of my mentors now. I love Gary, but it's just crazy. Back then I didn't know who he was, so I ordered all of his plays and I read all of his plays. I'm like, wow, I like this guy's writing. Like, this guy's good. And I set up a meeting, or I didn't set up a meeting. She set up a meeting with Gary and I met him, and this is before COVID. And we met and had coffee, and he said he didn't even know I had a writing partner. He had just read the play, which was flagged for him by his assistant, who now is, she's now an incredibly talented screenwriter who's, working on television in the WGA. But his assistant flagged it for him to read, said, "Yeah, you'll probably like this, Gary." And so I met him, and he said, "Hey, this is really good. I like this. You should be working." I said, "Thanks." I said, "I'd love to work." He goes, "Well, if you could write on any show, what would it be?" I said, "Whatever you're doing, buddy. Hire me." And he laughed at me. He laughed just like that, just like you laughing right now. He laughed at me, and he said, he's like, "Okay, good answer." And 3 years later, we got a call from him, and he said, "Hey, send me your best Chicago sample right now. I can't promise you anything, but if it's good, I'll fight for you." And we got offered a job staffing the next day. We got our first staff writer position. Yeah.
You said something about he wanted a Chicago story?
Yeah, so Gary had just started show running Power Book 4 Force in Chicago, and he was looking for a Chicago sample, a sample of a show set in Chicago, which is kind of my wheelhouse, So Adam and Adam's also from Chicago as well, and we set, not everything, but a lot of our projects are set in Chicago. It's a city that's very dear to me, and I know it very well. And so, yeah, we sent him one of our specs, and that was it.
I wanted to ask you about your play, Musket and the Rat. So how was it to never have written a play, or I mean, let me just ask you this: where did you first begin writing it? Like physically, where were you writing this play?
Probably in my living room on my laptop on my MacBook Air. Yeah.
Okay. And so then you'd met this gentleman who said, "Look, me and my family have a production company. We want to make this." Opening night, you're hearing people say dialogue. Maybe you know these characters loosely, maybe not, but you know the world, maybe not. How was it to see these theater goers laughing? Maybe not, maybe being
awesome.
shy.
Well, first of all, yes, I knew the world. I knew the world intimately. That the entire world of heroin and gangs and drug abuse and violence. Yeah, that's a world I know very, very well. So yeah, it was seeing the actors bring the words to life was something, but it was incredible. It was incredible. It was so cool to see things that I wrote being performed by an actor. It was awesome. I mean, I just thought it was incredible. I did have a little, some differences with the director. I had a part that I was going to play, and I created the character. I literally created the character, and I wanted to play this character. And the director had a different idea of who the character was, and rather than get into any type of an argument with him, I kind of recused myself from performing, and I said, I think I'm just gonna sit this out. You can cast somebody else, and I'm gonna just observe as a writer. And that's what I did. But opening night was incredible. Opening night, it was a packed house. There was a lot of people there. I had friends of mine from Chicago come. I had former gang members, current gang members come. I had people that I know, from out here in Los Angeles that aren't in the business, come, and just the response was awesome. People were like, this is incredible. We've never seen anything like this. It was so great. It was incredibly fulfilling.
A former CAA agent came. What's her name?
Her name's Elizabeth.
Elizabeth, sorry.
Yeah,
okay.
she's my manager now. And
okay.
so, yeah, now she's a manager. But, yeah, she came. She came and saw the play. And I think that was like mid-run,
So here's something that you didn't even know you could do a play sort of on this sort of street world or whatever, the world of drug dealing.
I had no idea. And now Adam and I had already written probably 3 pilots by that time and like 2 specs. We were finalists for the Warner Brothers Writers Workshop. I mean, we placed in a bunch of different competitions. I mean, we were already well on our way writing stuff, but we weren't getting anywhere. I mean, we made the finals of the WB Writers Workshop, which is a really big deal. And they kept track of us after that, even though we didn't get in. But we weren't getting anything. It was really frustrating. And I never ever could have imagined that me writing this play would attract people that would be able to change our life. I mean, Elizabeth changed my life by introducing me to Gary, and Gary changed my life by giving us a shot. It was incredible.
And when you saw Musket come to life, how was that? I don't know if you met the actress.
Yeah, I met all the actors. I was there quite a few times. The director let me come to as many rehearsals as I want. It was really it was a very good experience for me. And they were great. All the actors were great. I want to see it put up in Chicago. It's a Chicago story. It's about Chicago gang culture. It's about Chicago drug culture. It's about Chicago people. It deserves to be put up in Chicago. And that's what I want. That's what my dream is right now, to get that play put up in Chicago.
What is the Chicago energy to the story? I just find that interesting.
To the story?
Yeah.
Well, look, I wrote a strong, excuse my language, badass female character, unlike other female characters that I've seen on the screen, you know. And I knew women like her. I knew women like her, you know. And so I wrote this character she's not to be messed around with. She will come at you like any man will. She's the real deal. She doesn't suffer fools, you know. And that Chicago doesn't suffer fools, you know. People in Chicago don't suffer fools. She didn't suffer fools. She was about her money. She was about her business. She doesn't mess around. That's who Musket Cherry is. And that's the character that I created, you know. And so the actors did an incredible job out here in LA, but I want to see it in Chicago, performed by Chicago actors. That's what I would love to see. Not because the LA cast wasn't excellent, they were, but because I want to see it in Chicago. It's my own thing. I want to see it.
And so she's hard as nails, doesn't suffer fools, but she cares for her brother.
Exactly. She's hard as nails. She doesn't suffer fools, you know. She'll do whatever she's got to do, but she's got a huge heart. She's got a huge heart, and she's loyal. You know, a lot of the stories that I tell, a lot of the stories that I'm interested in telling center around loyalty and disloyalty and trust, you know, and betrayal. Like, those are themes that I'm very interested in my work, you know. And Adam and I both are interested in our work, but I mean, specifically speaking, with regards to especially like plays that I write, I'm very interested in those topics because I've experienced a lot of that, you know.
What do you think about the fact that you are now able to make a living from essentially some of the things that happened to you by taking these stories or the essence of who some of these people were or are still currently?
Yeah. I think it's surreal. I couldn't have ever imagined this. I used to be in my prison cell dreaming about maybe like one day like having a girlfriend and maybe like a job, maybe, and just doing something positive, you know. And then when I got out, I remember like one of my biggest aspirations, I got a job at Jersey Mike's for a little while, the sub shop. Job very briefly there. But I was so excited that I got a job there, and I thought, one day, I'm going to open up a Jersey Mike's franchise. First, I'm going to become the manager, and then I'm going to get a franchise. You know? I mean, my world was very small back then, and I didn't think that I could do much. So to go through it all and then get to a place where now, I mean, first of all, as a stunt guy, as a stuntman, I was playing the armed robber. I was playing the drug addict. I was playing the car thief. I'm playing these people that are shooting, getting shot. I was the armed robber, the car thief. You know, I was that guy when I was younger. And now I was portraying that guy on TV, and I'm making a living doing it. It was, I mean, I remember like working on Chicago PD season 2 or whatever, the stunt coordinator, like, man, Sammy, that's real natural. You look real. So like, it was mind-boggling. And then to go from that to then writing characters and creating characters and, you know, getting to do that aspect of things, which is what I'm doing now. There's what you know, only somebody that's done it can really relate to it, I suppose. I can't really articulate it, you know, well enough. It's incredible. It's awesome.
How important is it for a beginning screenwriter to find an agent?
It's not important. There's so many things I wish I knew when I was starting out that I know now. I would have cut off my pinky to get an agent when I was just starting out because I thought that was what's going to do it for me. It's not. You know, I used to cold call, cold email agents. I'd get the, you know, emails for all the big agencies, all the mid-tier agencies, everybody. And, you know, 1 out of 10 would respond to me. 1 out of 100 would say, yes, send me something. But I never got anything from it. And just to circle back to the actual question, and why, agents can help you once you're already rolling. You know, if you're hypothetical, if you're an influencer with 1 million subscribers or 10 million followers, whatever, yeah, an agent can help you. You know, an agent can parlay that into something, right? If you're a screenwriter and you haven't yet gotten on a TV show, you're pre-WGA, you're, you know, not, you know, you haven't had a feature film made, you know, with a budget, or a film made that has done something exceptional in a festival or whatnot, agents aren't interested in you because they're not going to be able to make money with you, you know? And I've got one of my really good friends is an agent. You know, one of my really, really, really good friends is an agent at one of the big agencies. But it, you know, it just is what it is. I didn't know this. I thought I'm going to get an agent, and then this agent's going to get me here and get me here. No. It doesn't work like that. No, you got to do. And even when you have an agent, a lot of times you're getting the leads. A lot of times agents. A lot of agents, you know, good agents are awesome and get you great meetings and you know, get you great general meetings and great, you know, meetings, pitch meetings and things like that. And, you know, they're sending you out to the town. But oftentimes you're also doing a lot of legwork, you know? And no, it's much more important to get a manager. It's way more important, especially when you're starting, to get a manager. Because a manager is much more likely to take a chance on you. They're looking at the big picture. Agents are looking like, okay, cool. How can we profit? How can we make this work? Who can we set this guy up with? This woman up with? You know, who can, you know, what can we get them in? And you know, where can we get this? And how can we? Managers are looking like 5 years, 10 years, what this person can do. Wow, they're a really good writer. Wow, I'm gonna take them on. I'm gonna try, even if they're not staffed on a show, even if they haven't done a movie, even if they're not in the WGA. And I'm not even just talking about. I'm not talking about, you know, managers that are, you know, for lack of a better term, like low level managers or whatnot. I'm talking about, you know, the big companies, and oftentimes you can find managers that will give you a shot if you have talent, you know. And they're willing to take a chance with you. And I think that's way more important, especially when you're first starting out.
Do you see that a lot in LA, whether you're at a coffee shop writing or whatever? A lot of people waiting, they have that manager or agent, but they're not doing anything about it?
No, because I don't concern myself with what anybody else is doing. Really, I don't. I don't hang out in coffee shops in LA either, but like, I just don't, you know. I'm a guy. My only speed is go, and I'm hustling, you know. I'm trying to make things happen all the time. Adam and I have written over 21 projects, you know, and we have another 5, 6 pitches, and we have another, you know, 4, 5 outlines, and then I have ideas. So I don't think about, or I'm not paying attention to what somebody else is doing or not doing. I know that I'm working, we're working hard. It's just, I look at it the same, this is how I look at it. I look at it the same way I used to look at it when I was a prize fighter, when I was a boxer, you know? And even before boxing, I was an MMA fighter. I had MMA fights too. And I remember when I was running out in the street, jogging, wintertime, snowing in Chicago, and I'd be jogging. And I would be focused, and I would be thinking about my opponent. And I would be thinking about how this guy was training harder than me. Like, this guy's out there running faster than me. I'm doing 3 miles, he's doing 5 miles. You know, I was thinking about what he's doing, and I'm like, I'm not gonna let him train harder than me. And I don't mean to, you know, use that as like, oh, other people are competition, because that's not what I mean. I just know that nobody's gonna do it for you, you know? Nobody's gonna do the work for you. So I know I gotta do the work, yes, I have a team, thank God, you know, that are great and they help us and they get us out there, but I got to do the work. So I'm not concerned with other people, what they're doing or not doing. I gotta get out there and do it, you know?
And that go, is that the Chicago in you or is that the Sammy in you?
I don't know what it is in me. It's something. It's something in me. I've been told. I don't know.
Or do you remember all the times when you just said, like, you remember saying, I want to get a job, I want to have a girlfriend, maybe I'll be the manager here. And now you realize, like, I mean, yeah.
This is what I realize. It's possible. I used to be like flummoxed that I'm doing any of this stuff. I got friends that are dead now, or people that I don't associate with anymore too, they would not believe what's happening. They wouldn't be able to comprehend it. Not because they're not intelligent, but because like they just wouldn't get it. I know that, and look, I've done a lot of television as a stuntman. You know, I've done a bunch of stuff. I know that guys in prison probably have seen my face 100 times, and probably they're like, wow, that guy looks familiar. Man, he looks like, you know. But they don't really think it's me, because it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't even make sense to me. I only tell you that because this business is so weird, and it's just so bizarre, the whole thing, that now it's just like, why not? Like, why not? We're here, we're doing it, you know, why not? Shit, I wrote a play, you know, and it got produced, got on a TV show, pretty good writer. Why not? You know, I just feel like anybody could take that mindset. I'm not like a motivational speaker, coach, or anything. You know, it's like, why not you? Why not me? You know, if you want it, you want it. You go after it.
If a new screenwriter can't get an agent, how would they expect to get their screenplays read and out there?
It's tough. It's tough because a lot of these screenplay competitions I'm not like a huge fan of, you know. I'm just not. But certain competitions can get you noticed. Certain competitions. And you know, look, if it was me, if you're asking me what I would do, I'm just sending my stuff to agents. I'm sending my stuff to managers. I mean, this is what I used to do. I mean, this is certainly not like a popular thing to do. I probably get a little, you know, frowned upon, but that's just, I'm somebody, my motto kind of in my brain is like a closed mouth doesn't get fed, you know? So if I don't know anybody, if I can't, you know, if I don't know, there was a long time I didn't know anybody, I'm sending my stuff out to people, you know? I mean, I got my first manager I couldn't get rep by anybody. My first manager I was stunt doubling a guest star on a TV show. And we became friends, we became buddies over the course of the show. And, you know, it's totally frowned upon to, you know, to try to hustle an agent or a manager from, you know, especially if you're a stunt person. But I did. I said, you know, can I meet your manager? And they asked me, can you, you know, the guy asked me, he said, you got an acting reel? And I did. I had, you know, done a bunch of acting by that time. I gave it to him and he said, oh, yeah, you're pretty good. I'll introduce you. And I got repped. I mean, so everybody's not working on, you know, doing stunts or in a position to do that. But I'm just saying that was like an unorthodox way that I got repped, you know, because I couldn't from emailing people. It wasn't working. I mean, the advice I would have is, the only advice that I really could give is to try to meet people that could potentially take interest in it, to enter competitions that are legitimate, you know, legitimate competitions, and if the right people see it, you're going to get noticed. You know, but it's hard. It's just hard. It's just hard. I thought getting a SAG card was hard, and writing is a lot harder, you know, so it's tough.
Because a SAG card you could get theoretically doing extra work.
I mean, in Chicago it doesn't work like that. Like you have to be a principal performer, or you have to you have to either book a role as a principal performer, or there just has to be something. There has to be a need for you. There has to be some type of need. As a stunt person, for example, to get a SAG card, you either have to be the perfect fit to double somebody, or they need your look or something like that. It's like a catch-22 getting a SAG card. It's so hard, you know, because in order to work on shows, you have to have a SAG card, but in order to, you know, but you also have to work on a show to get a SAG card. So you have to have that first break to get it, you know. In California, they do the voucher thing, I think, with the extras or whatnot, but they never did that in Chicago. But all that to say, like, I only mean more difficult in the sense that I had no idea how tough trying to get anywhere with our writing would be, and it's extremely difficult. It's extremely difficult. It's extremely competitive. And yeah, I mean, but it is what it is. You can, you know, you can do it.
And what about a book? If you ever return to the idea of writing, let's say, a memoir, do you think that would be just as difficult, but just a different beast?
I'm intimidated by writing a book. I really am. I think it would be tougher for me for some reason. I don't know. I just really, it's the one thing I haven't written. I've written short films. I've written feature films. I've written short plays. I've written full-length plays. I've, you know, written half-hour comedies. I've written full-length, you know, dramas. I've never written a book. So I don't know.
I believe you've said you're not Hollywood.
Did I say that?
Oh, you might have. You might have said it in passing.
All right.
I don't think it's something you just said in passing, and I was just curious. What does that mean? Not Hollywood, even though you're here in LA, you live in the proper LA County area.
Sure.
What is Hollywood? What is not Hollywood?
I don't know. I can't remember exactly what the context was when I said I'm not Hollywood, but what I mean by that is I don't go to parties. I'm sober. You know, I've been sober almost 12 years. I don't, you know, go mingle with a lot of people. I'm comfortable at home. I'm kind of a homebody. I've got a couple friends that I like to hang out with on a regular basis. I've got my best friend Adam. I've got my best friend Billy. You know, I smoke cigars. I kind of have a simple life. I work out. I do jujitsu. I just do things that I enjoy outside of writing, you know. That Hollywood to me, in that sense, is you're always looking for the next thing in a very artificial way. You know, you're at a party and you're talking to somebody and you're noticing that they're looking past you at the next person. I mean, when I was first starting out as a stunt guy, I went to different stunt, you know, hustles. And I would be talking to somebody, like having a conversation with them, and I would notice that they were just looking past me, trying to find like a more interesting or valuable person to talk to. And it's the same way with everything else. I don't really like that. And that's not, I don't want to associate with somebody like that. And I don't value that. So for me, I don't live in Hollywood. I did for a while. I don't live in Hollywood. Yeah, I mean, I guess, look, Hollywood is smoke and mirrors. Hollywood is smoke and mirrors. That's the whole business is. So I try, even though I'm a part of it, and I love creating, I love writing, I love creating, I love performing, you know. I also like leaving and going to a quiet house, you know, playing with my animals, you know, spending time with my wife. Like, I like that. So I guess that's the best way I can really just explain it.
Is it hard to be sober in LA?
No, not for me. Not for me. I mean, it certainly could be. Could be hard if I wasn't, you know, diligent. But you know, I'm pretty serious about my sobriety, you know, and because I know what I was like prior. And you know, there's the old saying, you go to a barber shop enough times, you're going to get a haircut. And so, hey, look, I don't hang out around a lot of parties and drinking and drugs. It's not my thing. So like, I don't care if you drink around me. I don't care if you smoke pot around me. I don't care. I'm not, you're not going to see me hanging out with that every day. And, you know, works for me.
And even with people who smoke pot, the drug culture is very similar, even if people say, well, marijuana is not hurtful. Okay, it's not, but the drug culture, there's a similarity. If you know that culture, there's sort of a line that's very similar to any culture.
I've been away from it for so long, you know. I mean, you're talking to a guy that used to smoke crack and shoot heroin and I mean, like, I was a wild man. And for me, I've been away from it so long, I don't want it anymore. That's not the life I want, you know. So for me, it's not difficult, you know, and God willing, it will continue to not be difficult, you know.